Hello, fellow foodies. This is Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you're listening to FOODIE Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. This week on the show, we're going to dive into some really cool work that's dedicated to the conservation of biocultural diversity. We're going to talk about education and outreach efforts and also some delicious teas that are coming to us from the Caribbean. Our guest today is Dr. Sonia Peter. She is the director of the Biocultural Education and Research program in Barbados, and she's also the founding director of Heritage Teas Barbados. Dr. Peters is the former head of the Department of Chemistry at Barbados Community College, and she is the president-elect of the Society for Economic Botany. She's been organizing some pretty amazing initiatives in Barbados dedicated to recapturing the traditional biocultural heritage of the island, and also sharing connections to this knowledge through the special line of Heritage Teas. I'm so happy to have her on the show today. It's great to see you, Sonia. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be here, Cass. Great to see you as well.
Yeah. So I thought maybe we could just start with some of the basics.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us what is biocultural heritage? What is biocultural diversity?
All of that I do really is centered around the value of that interface between plants and people. And so I'm going to answer with that focus. And we know that there's that intertwining of survival and dependence on plants in myriad ways, for housing, for clothing, for medicine, for dyes, for ritual, for spiritual nourishment. So we are intertwined with plants, and it's important that we understand that all we do, which encompasses our cultural value, is linked to the availability of the plants around us. A simple thing, such as sitting under a tree that offers a shade, is part of our biocultural dependence. But we know that the very important part is that if we do not conserve the number of species that we have available, I may make a short reference here to the degree of biodiversity we have in the Caribbean. This is an area that there's a high rate of endemicity, with some areas having 50% of their plant species isolated to their region. And that's amazing. So across the Caribbean, we have developed with such a range of plants available that we depend on them for most of the things that we do. And my disappointment is that as we move towards what we see as development, we have been moving away from the importance of plants in our lives, other than seeing them as sources of food. And even then, we are forgetting our indigenous foods and are reaching out, being dependent on ships arriving to provide food for us. And that disappoints me. And this is why I'm working to reconnect my public with the appreciation of the array of plants we have available, not only in Barbados. We're located, we know, most easterly of the Caribbean archipelago. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of our range of plants as we were put into the sugarcane plantation culture. And because our island is small and the terrain is easily maneuvered around, we lost, it is claimed, about 90% of our virgin plant cover. That is distressing, but we do share a lot of our indigenous species with our Caribbean neighbors. But it's, disappointing to me that we have lost that connection, and part of it is because we lost our diversity. And I'm trying to reconnect our people with what diversity we have remaining and the heritage knowledge of how we use those plants.
That's great. Well, I think that islands are such an incredible place to study resilience and diversity. Yes. And I was wondering, maybe could you elaborate a bit more on what food systems are like for island nations in the Caribbean, because, your Barbados in particular is the easternmost island, and roughly how much of the food is grown on the island versus how much has to be brought in?
Yeah, great question again, Cass. As an island, we know that the marine environment is also going to be a vital component of our sourcing food for nourishment. And therefore, there's that great dependence on marine life. Fish, we are known as the land of the flying fish. And it's part of our signature dish, which is called cuckoo and flying fish. I hope that next time you're here, you'll be able to sample that dish. But in addition to that, we use a lot of tubers, a lot of sweet potato and cassava. And we do import, as I made reference before, a significant percentage otherwise of our food resource. And we are working to overcome that. I think that COVID-19 and the restrictions proved really harsh even here. And when I say harsh, I mean in terms of the visualization of how our people were so dependent on the food that was brought into the island. And we suffered from having the long lines of persons needing to get into a supermarket when in the previous history of our people, backyards were full of the food that we would need. I even know my grandmother didn't have a lot of additional land, but what she did, she grew as much of her food as she could. And this is something, again, that we've moved away from. We are accustomed, growing pumpkins in our backyard. We're accustomed growing watermelon, spinach hanging over, our trellises, bananas growing in the back of your yard, you're planting, so we were accustomed to doing that. And unfortunately, it has become in vogue to go more the fast nutrition route instead of the route where you take time and pride in growing your own food, harvesting your own food, and celebrating a meal based on that tradition.
That's great. Yeah, I think one of my favorite trees on the island are, of course, the luscious mangoes that can be found everywhere, and then also breadfruit as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're accustomed. Yeah, that's what the history of us, especially as we moved away from being considered as a colonial outpost and becoming independent in 1966, where we removed most of those colonial trappings and then begun to do things for ourselves. And that's correct. We utilized the bounty that was there naturally provided for us. But that we get cultural penetration, and that always impacts on the way that we do things and our cultural expression, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and on this topic of COVID-19, it's drastically changed local economies across the globe, especially economies that are heavily dependent on tourism. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, in some cases, I've been reading about how more people are turning towards appreciating or revalorizing local culture. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that's also happened in Barbados, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great observation. I think that I sometimes make reference to COVID-19 as the unfortunate catalyst, because it has forced us inward. We had to look inward, and we had to look at how we can survive. We have to live with restrictions, both in terms of how we do things and how we source things. So yes, at the governmental level, we are seeing a greater emphasis on reintroducing our local people to the special green spaces we have here. Whereas before the tourist influx would have been targeted in terms of advertising, but we are seeing more of that in terms of our green spaces being offered up to our local population. And it has been great because, people this is a time where you need respite. And many persons are, sharing when they're in these green spaces. Before, they would have been caught up in life and living otherwise. But now you're forced to have that downtime. You're forced to have that downtime with family. And they're moving into our green spaces. We've got Andromeda Botanic Gardens, which is, and you've been there, and you know how
beautiful place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that is now they're looking at a new model. They're offering persons time and space to come celebrate, whatever family event you think you would like to celebrate. So persons that are going in with their blankets and their baskets and just having a blast, sitting under all of that lushness. We've got Flower Forest, Botanical Garden as well. That is a more open and expansive space and a lot of local varieties. And also they're offering persons to just come and, share in what a green space can offer. So yes, COVID is forcing us to look inward. A lot of organizations that are looking at boosting agriculture, boosting entrepreneurship, have become more visible, offering programs to young people, to generate that enthusiasm into growing your own food again. So it has indeed catalyzed for me what I see as an increase in greening activities and a boost to the general green movement on the island.
That's great. Well, and I was so impressed when you hosted the biennial symposium to celebrate biocultural heritage on the island. And I recall there were a good number of entrepreneurial small businesses starting to think about how to have island developed products. And
that's right.
Can you tell us a bit about that program and the kinds of activities that you all are engaged in with local entrepreneurs and the public?
Yes. Actually, I was so happy to become a member of a cooperative called Emerging Brands of Barbados. And the underlying philosophy here is, again, to embrace what's local and to demonstrate how really great branding towards our innovative ideas can really lead to a highly marketable product, not only for local consumption, but for export. So in Emerging Brands, of which Heritage Teas is a member, we have
I have some here too. This is amazing and so fragrant. Really lovely. Yes.
I'll talk about Heritage Teas separately, but we've got a number of young people with great ideas. There is one, and the thing about Emerging Brands is that they've made an effort to embrace local culture also in the naming of product. So we've got this lovely line of pepper sauces that's called Old Duppy.
I have some of it in my fridge. My husband loves this stuff. Now, what does Duppy mean? What's the local translation of Duppy?
A Duppy in our tradition is a ghost.
Yes. It is really
like visit you whether you want it to or not, and it could be a good spirit or not a good spirit.
This hot sauce bottle, by the way, is about yay big, and I've had it since our trip to Barbados because all I can handle is like a little drop. Like I can take a drop and mix it into the food, and we're done. It's so powerful.
That's it.
But yeah.
So that's Old Duppy, and then we've got another company called, this is an interesting one, it's called Smiley Snow Cones. Barbadians are known for their friendliness, and that has been embraced in that product. So it's an ice-based product, but what is fascinating about them is that the syrups that they develop are based on local fruit. So they're using soursop to make their syrups. They're using mangoes. They're using what we call our golden apples, or green hard apples. It's not like the red apple. This is a green cord apple. So they're drawing on tradition and heritage in their product, in their branding. And that is what is exciting about emerging brands. And Heritage Teas became a member. And we really wanted to similarly demonstrate that we can add value to our bioculture by producing this line of teas. Under the underlying concept there are cooling teas. These are cooling teas within our tradition that are taught to just put your body into a good state of health. Even if you want to have a good night's rest, using a tea based on soursop is known to do that for you. If you want to boost the immune system, where you want to use something that has a lot of color, rich in anthocyanins, or rosé ginger, which is based on sorrel, will do that for you. If you want to take what we call take away heat from the body in terms of the inflammatory response, then golden tea, which is based on turmeric and ginger, that will do that for you. So we wanted to really offer an innovative package in our tradition in these teas. And as you mentioned earlier, we say that when you take a sip of one of our teas, you're really sipping on our tradition.
That's great. Yeah. It's fascinating to me too, because I mean, I know as you're listing these ingredients, my mind's immediately going to different natural products that we know are found in these. And in addition to being an ethnobotanist, you're also a chemist.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about how your chemistry background is also played into this work?
Yes. Interestingly, my journey into ethnobotany came through my chemistry. After I had my children, and I said I always wanted to get into research, but I was into teaching. And I said, well, I assessed the time and I thought I could get into research. And I remember my supervisor sort of left it up to me in terms of what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to do something in organic chemistry. And I knew that he was a natural product chemist. And so I went to him, but he left it up to me. And I remember wandering the hill leading up to campus one day, and I found myself just looking in the roadside at the plants. And I got immediately inspired because I've always been fascinated about discovery. And it came to me, well, suppose you were able to discover something new from one of these plants that we just sort of ignore on the roadside. And indeed, that is what happened. I selected a plant that is called horse knicker, and it actually has cultural heritage because the pod produces a gray seed, which is called the knicker seed. And this is used in the game that we call worry, which is a game that is played in Africa. So the game was actually brought over to the island. And I discovered about 13 novel compounds in the class of furanoditerpenes. And in the process of doing that, whenever you begin to look deeply into natural products, you butt up headlong into people. Yeah. It's unavoidable. And while I was doing my study, I was referencing NAPRALERT, and hearing about Norman Farnsworth and all of the scientists that he worked with. And I saw an ad for a conference in Chicago that he was going to be the speaker. And I said, I have to go there. And I applied and surprisingly got the leave, because that's not easy to do in an academic institution at all times. And the exposure I got at that SCB meeting simply crystallized for me, that I had to continue working. Chemistry, yes, but that plant-people relationship. And so when I do study my plants, I'm studying both sides of that spectrum. I'm interested in the importance and value to people, and I'm interested in validating why and how people are using the plants. And where I am now, I have a list of 60 plants that we used during slavery, for all the harsh conditions that we can imagine impacted on that population during that period. And I am doing two things. One is to document the phytochemistry of those plants, and secondly, have a look at adding value in product development. So far, I've been able to demonstrate that some of these plants can impact on cancer. We've had a study on the impact of a particular plant on prostate cancer, and we saw initially that it decreased the viability of the prostate cancer cell, and we were able to even identify the growth phase that it was impacting on. And we were bold, and the results were so good that we applied for a patent for a fraction of the extract, and now we're doing preparative layer chromatography, HNMR, CNMR, to try to get to the molecule. But I would like to say that I don't always believe in single entity interventions. I'm also interested in polyfunctional extracts as well. So I'm running that gambit, and I find it most exciting to be able to capture the importance of the biocultural tradition and then use my chemistry for valorization.
Oh, that's amazing. And so important to human health. So, I mean, it's important on the, as you said, on the aspect of
Yes.
maintaining these heritages,
Right.
but also getting to the scientific understanding of how these might have worked and how can they work in the future as potential therapies.
Yeah, because I say that, we call it tradition, but the populations that became confident in knowing how to use these plants did so by doing some of the same things that we would do in a traditional scientific method, So they found their material, they found how best to extract what they wanted from the material. They did the experiments to see how they worked. They realized what worked and what didn't work, and that is what they passed on. So they were really doing scientific discovery way back, and I think now that we've got the better tools to probe, I really do believe that it's our responsibility to really, celebrate traditional knowledge and to take it further.
That's great. And that's so well said. I 100% agree. People will often ask me, well, how did people discover that this plant is used this way or is prepared this way and then used for this disease? It's exactly that. You don't have to be in a lab coat in a room to do these experiments. Humans have experimented with nature for millennia and passed down the things that work.
That's right.
Yeah. That's great.
It seems so simple, but it really is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to touch on some of your other activities. I know that in addition to supporting entrepreneurship around these products, you're also very involved in education through art and other outreach venues. Can you tell us a bit about that, and kind of what have you found has been most impactful in working with different age groups as well?
Yes. So, I mean, I've been in chemical education for a number of years. I'm willing to say how many, but I'm therefore leveraging my experience in teaching and interfacing for transfer of knowledge. And even when I was in the classroom, I always tried to be as creative as possible, because it's important to make the transfer of knowledge enjoyable. And not seen as a chore, not to be seen as a chore. So I have developed, pardon me, a number of modalities I think that will allow me to achieve that within my target public for the nonprofit organization. One of them, well, I'm proud about everything I do because I put my heart into everything.
Yes.
So it's difficult to single anyone out, but we are currently developing a mobile herbal museum, and this is extremely special. Everything is good, but extremely special because I've decided to dedicate it to the memory of my son. And in this mobile museum, I'm taking this into the schools, and our exhibits are going to be, as you would see in a standard museum, but they're going to be more interactive. I want students to see how a poultice would have been prepared. I want them to see, I want them to see what plants you would use to make a vapor rub. I want them to understand also what a cooling tea is and how you can use organoleptic properties to pick up the medicinal value of teas, whether it's a woody aroma, whether it's a bitter taste, so that they understand it was not just making a tea, but the individuals who came up with these did understand that it was the content of the tea that was valuable. We've also got, what is the hallmark of a museum? Lots of herbal specimen. And I make reference to Hans Sloane, the labeled naturalist who came to the Caribbean in the 1600s. He spent a lot of time in Jamaica. I think he actually was married in Jamaica. I stand under correction there, but I know that he and his wife and family were living in Jamaica, but he did come to Barbados as well as the other islands, and he has left his collection, his herbarium specimen collection, to the Museum of Natural History in London. And I was fortunate to get access to some of the imagery he's left behind, and it was fascinating. I did an annual lecture last year. It was fascinating to show my public that many of the species that he captured in his 1600s specimen, we actually have them. But we are not, we are not aware of their value. They're growing along our roadside, they're growing around our garage, and we are not recognizing their value. And I was happy that I could show them that. So I'm going to have those in our mobile museum again, so that persons can see and make the reference. Also, we decided to do a number of series, again, capturing the essence of what is special about us. And as you mentioned, breadfruit has a lot of history within the Caribbean, mutiny on the Bounty, and how they made two efforts to get breadfruit here. When it first came, the enslaved Africans really did not want to incorporate it, but it has become an important staple in the Caribbean over time. And the series, I interview series, and again, I want to thank you for being my first participant. Under the breadfruit tree, I called it that because, again, I wanted to give some focus to that heritage value. And the value in those interviews was allowing my public to interface with persons like yourself that are working within that same nexus of the value of plants to public health. And then we're doing so many things. So two others I'll talk about quickly. The Farmer's Kitchen was targeting knowledge about food security. And I thought that one was timely, demonstrating how we can go into our backyard actually and harvest beautiful plants and then make a meal surrounding these plants. That was pretty exciting. We even had wines that were made from plants such as aloe wine and bay leaf wine, roasted breadfruit wine. Can you imagine that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the wine actually had the flavor of roasted breadfruit. So again, it's all, modalities that they can embrace our heritage, our culture, our biocultural tradition that would interest my public. And the last one, also exciting, we are going to publish in 2021 a coloring book in which we celebrate the artistry, the beauty, the textural beauty within our fruit trees, the fruit, the foliage. And we're actually going to have a couple copies that will be auctioned. We're going to have them specially embossed and, again, adding value wherever we can.
That's fantastic. I love all of these initiatives, Sonia. I mean, you've been so incredibly busy and effective in hitting these in different areas. And your description of, of teaching people how to recognize and transform plants into products for their well-being is so powerful. I mean, I think that, even as I learn new plants in different locations, there's something special about when you encounter a plant that you've learned about. Yes. It's almost like running into an old friend, right? You're like, hello. I sometimes talk to plants. I don't even think about it, but it really, for me, is like I'm running into an old friend that has some special power, some special attribute, and it just makes you feel so much more intensely connected to your landscape.
That's right.
And as we teach children and adults to really value their surroundings, what you're doing, that's such a powerful message that you're spreading.
Yes. So, like I said, it's everything that I'm bringing to the fore, and it's been going remarkably well. Sometimes I stop and I wonder, is there some kind of divine intervention that's just lining up things for me? Not everything in my life, but that's living. We have our high points and our low points, and I'm even more dedicated to explore those high points.
That's great. Well, let's talk a bit about your other major endeavor that's taken a lot of your creative energy, and I want to go over Heritage Teas. And I'm going to hold this up to the screen for those watching this on YouTube so you can see this beautiful label. And you sent me this lovely packet I've got Bay Cafe, which has bay leaf and soursop with notes of coffee and cinnamon. And I love the golden tea. It's got root powders with cayenne, and this has ginger and turmeric and these amazing warming flavors of the Zingiberaceae family. Can you tell us, how did you start this path towards forming a company and going and pulling all this together? It's just really amazing.
I mean, it's for me, it's another tool. I'm really excited to see how it has developed. And I tell you what happened. I opted to come out of my academic institution because I wanted to be a little closer to the people that I was targeting. I've been educating students for 30 plus years, and I wanted my platform to reach other age groups. And so my very first day, I remember I said, you know what, I'm going to celebrate this transition by renting an office. No office space. I rented an office, and I said it has to be an office with large windows that allows me to see the landscape. And my very first meeting was with these two ladies, Andrea Fleming and Jacqueline Cumberbatch. And they told me, we've been following you on Facebook, and we recognize that you've been doing a lot of tea sampling, which is what he was doing at that time. And they told me, well, we are also interested in teas, and we would like, just you to give us some advice. And as I spoke with them for about half an hour, it just clicked to me that here we have three capacities that we can bring together because one of the individuals was a business executive, put it that way. And the other one was working in social marketing, networking. And I said, I can bring my chemistry expertise, my interest in plant heritage, and we can come up with a really very valuable product. And to be quite honest with you, that day, Heritage Teas was branded because we went to the Department of Intellectual Property and registered that very same day. And then from there, we took a lot of time in formulating. You know, we would sit around our formulation table and we would try different elements together. And so all of those formulations didn't happen totally naturally. We knew what we wanted to put them in. We knew what we wanted to put into the formulations, but the ratios and the actual overall essence that we wanted came over time. And I'm extremely pleased with them, especially so we were recognized in our national coloring competition last year, and they were all awarded gold. And and then one of them, Rosé Ginger, was adjudged to be the best Bajan beverage submitted. So it was testimony.
Congratulations. Wow.
Yeah, thank you. And these were international judges, which makes it even more special in terms of, their exposure. So we were really very pleased in terms of what we had developed. So we have a heritage product, and it's a heritage product of great value.
So that's so fantastic, Sonia. Where can the listeners find out more about Heritage Teas?
Okay. We have a Facebook page, Heritage Teas Barbados. We have an IG account, Barbados Teas. And we'll even be sharing more about Heritage Teas on our website, which is in development. And again, Biocultural Education and Research Program, if you search for that, you'll get information on all of our platforms, including our tea production.
Oh, fantastic. And I know that we're not going to be able to have the biennial symposium in person this year, but can you tell us about what you're planning for the next meeting? We're going to be doing it remotely?
Yes. Still excited to be able to bring that to the public, though online. We have already a great lineup of persons under our three thematics, future of farming, biodiversity and the green economy, which references a point that you made earlier, and also plants as sources of healing. And we're even under that segment looking at as sources of healing as it relates to spirituality, because we've got Dr. Anthony Richards, who very interestingly has been observing specific types of plants that are associated with the funeral ceremony. And he's tracing that tradition back to Africa as well. And I thought that it's good to look at the breadth of the discussion. And so we're going to have those three thematics. We've got about between 4 and 5 speakers for each one. And then we're also going to have this exciting exhibitors hall, emerging brands that I spoke of. We're going to have a display where persons can go into their virtual rooms and find out all about their product, even if they're interested in purchasing product. And then last of all, we're going to offer some live tours of some of those green spaces that I mentioned. We're going to have a live tour of Andromeda, the Forest Botanical Gardens. And we've got another area which gives fantastic views. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Cocoa Hill. We have to engage them, but we're hoping that they will be on board as well. So it's going to be quite an experience for persons who want to become part of our symposium.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much, Sonia, for coming on the show. This has been so enlightening and so energizing. And I just love all these examples you provided. And I hope that the listeners will stop to think about some of their own biocultural heritage in the areas where they live. And who knows if that weed along the side of the road by your house is actually something that's has a long history.
That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the point. We currently have what is considered a weed. It's considered a weed here, purslane, which I know you know about.
Mm-hmm.
It was even used by the enslaved for sore throat, well documented. And that's one of the ones we're looking at in terms of focusing on underutilized species.
Mm-hmm.
We had a beautiful session, not only looking at its medicinal value, it is in some, domains considered a superfood because it has a lot of omega-3 fatty acid content, lots of vitamin A and C, lots of interesting other natural products as well. And we've demonstrated how you can use it in preparing a beautiful soup, how you can use it in preparing your breads as a herbal addition, and also how it can be used as a topping on your pizza. So it's for persons to, we're not telling you to go and take things from your backyard you know nothing about.
Yeah.
But have a reconnection and see what's there that you have ignored before. And once you have some knowledge of how to use it, experiment, be a little innovative.
That's great. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Sonia. It was great speaking with you.
It always is, Cass. I'm so happy that they had the opportunity to share.
Thanks. You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious, recorded via Skype during the COVID-19 isolation period. Be sure to go onto our YouTube channel, Teach Ethnobotany, and click that subscribe button. Also do the same at Apple Podcasts, at the Foodie Pharmacology channel on Apple Podcast. You can find all of our past episodes at foodiepharmacology.com as well. Thanks so much for listening. Stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time.